All right, my name is Benjamin, otherwise known as Benjamin. And you may ask, who are you? What are you doing here? Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm a human being, just like every one of you. And I have a story, just like every one of you. So I'm going to give you three things I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And those things are this. I want you to do three things in your life. I want you to fail. I want you to fail often. I want you to fail big. 2, I want you to be intentional. You got to have intent and you got to follow through. And 3, I want you to be significant. Be significant. And I'm going to explain what significance is because sometimes we often confuse success with significance. And there are two different things. So my story, and I'll kind of weave my story into my points here. I was born in 1969. I was born on Mother's Day. And to this day, I remind my mother I'm the best Mother's Day gift she ever got. Now, when I was born, my mother was 17. She had to quit high school to have me. My brother was born 15 months later, not by the same father. My mother didn't marry my brother's father, and in fact divorced my father. So by the time she was 18, she had 2 kids. She had no high school degree. But you see, I was raised by someone who had intention and was strong-willed. And she went and she got her GED, and then she became the first person in her family to go to college. My father's family, I'm the first one that ever went to college. And I'm the first professional in my family to ever go to law school or any professional school. When I was born, I spent my first 2 years in the hospital because I was really sick. I was underweight, and in fact, there's a picture of me and my first birthday cake, and I swear the birthday cake is sort of bigger than me. They had to prop me up just to make it look good. And they found out that I had some allergy to milk or whatever, so I ended up being part of the Baylor study that developed soy milk alternatives for babies. So anybody who's ever seen the Pro Soybean can, I was part of this Baylor study that ultimately came out with that. And I was in the hospital for 2 years and got out. Now, when I was going to school, in a neighborhood that was blue collar, everyday working people. And it really wasn't that well known. It was in the city of Houston, close to downtown. Now back then, as I was telling my friend Mr. Crump here, back then we had what we call white flight, right? So white flight were all these people who were leaving the city because they didn't want to be around the inner city. And I was, my mother was white, my father's Mexican, and my mother, because she was poor, we were in the city. And I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly minority and predominantly poor. And we were lucky if you were middle class. You had a regular working job, 40 hours a week, and with regular pay. So I was going to school, and the HISD decided to start this magnet program they called Vanguard because they wanted to see if they could, we're now used to magnet programs all around, but back then, magnet programs were just an idea. So they said, where are we going to put this magnet program? And they tried to figure it out, and they said, we're going to put it in this neighborhood. It's called the Heights in Houston. So they put the magnet program, they put a pilot middle school, which happened to be my own middle school. And so I had to apply for it, had to get in. I remember that even the reason I applied for it was because of my 5th grade teacher at the time, Mrs. Bell. She was a beautiful black woman. She carried herself well. She was the kind of person that wore a blouse, had a nice skirt, wore pearls, knew how to take care of herself, knew the English language perfectly. I mean, she saw something in me, and she said, Benjamin, they're starting this magnet program, and I really think you should apply. Like, well, I don't think so. But she goes, no, you need to. She brought my mother in. She told my mother, go ahead and do that. I said, well, what if I don't get in? She said, Benjamin, don't be afraid to fail. The worst you could do is be in the same position that you're in now So don't be afraid to fail. I said, okay. So I took the test. I did the interviews. I mean, now, we're used to private schools where you got to go through all that. Back then, it was like a big thing for something like that to happen. Well, I got in. And 3 years later, I actually, they don't call middle school graduation, but they call it promotion. But I was promoted from middle school as the #1 student in the school. So they had the Vanguard program, and then I was considered the top of this class. I remember in the 8th grade, one of the things that we had awards for like best math student, best history student, all these things, who was the MVP in the band, that kind of stuff. In middle school, I played the drums in my middle school band because I had rhythm then. I still got it. And so I was, of course, growing up in the neighborhood, I'm not afraid to say, growing up in that neighborhood, I was the diverse one. I was the guy banging the drums. No one like me on the drum line. So in that school, I'd already done very well in math, and they were going to have this test to determine, they took the best math students and they said, whoever gets the highest score on this test out of the best, it will be considered the best, and they'll get this award. And I didn't want to take it, and my counselor said, no, Benjamin, you got to take it. You never know what's going to happen. I said, no, I don't want to do it. She goes, don't be afraid to fail, just do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. Of course, I did it, and I got the best score, and I was named the best math student. So I move away from from Houston to Austin. And I go into high school, and I go into the honors program in the high school. And I'm going through high school, going through my honors classes. Now, back then, I was very shy. Yeah, I know you probably, especially the people in the back row who know me the past couple of days, wouldn't think I was shy. I was really shy. And I was kind of nervous, so I didn't go out on dates in high school. I was like the student council guy. I was the honor society. I was the leader of the, sport and sister school committee, those kind of things. My brother, on the other hand, he was a star football player. He had a high school garage band. He had girlfriends, and he was like everything I wanted to be. And I was, but he had it. So I get through my junior year in high school, and I'm going through my summer. And how many people know that they have summer preparatory courses in college so that you can get credit while you're in high school for college? Now, back then, back in the mid-'80s, Duke University's program was considered to be the #1 preparatory program in the nation. Well, I applied and I got in. But guess what? I actually finally failed. I got in and I found out I wasn't mature enough for college yet. And I got in and I, up until that point, I told you about my strong mother, right? So up until that point, I always had leadership of my mother. When I was left to my own devices in another city, I partied, I didn't read, I just wanted to enjoy life on my own, and I got kicked out of the #1 college preparatory program. And you understand, but at that point, I was on my way to like Harvard and Princeton and all this stuff, because I was, my grades were good. I had the #1 preparatory college program on my resume and all that stuff. So that kind of just went by the wayside. And then, so I had to move on. I had to keep going. Went through high school. I finished my senior year, and I got a full ride. I got accepted to different colleges, but I got 2 full scholarships to University of Texas. And so I decided I was going to go to University of Texas. I still graduated with honors, It wasn't that I was any dumber than I was before. I just, wasn't mature at that point in terms of being on my own. So I get to college on a full ride from the University of Texas. I wouldn't have to have any college debt. 6 weeks into my college career, I go to my first college party. And I'm not embarrassed to say this. That's where I lost my virginity. And from that point on, I was like, women! In classes, my 8 o'clock physics classes, my 8 o'clock calculus classes, like, what? I don't need that. Yeah, I was on 6th Street. I was dancing almost every night. I was moving. I was talking. I was enjoying the life. And remember what happened, the 2 summers before. Apparently, I didn't learn from that. And after my first year of college, they kicked me out. They kicked me out. They suspended me. And at that time, I lost my full scholarship. So after my first year of college, I was a twice disgraced person in terms of my school. And I had to work. I had a girlfriend at that time who became my wife. And I worked for 3 years. And then 3 years, I decided, you know what? I really do want to become an attorney, because every time, just because I got kicked out of places, or just because, I lost this or that, I wasn't stupid. I didn't all of a sudden become dumb. It's just a matter of priorities. Remember I was talking about being intentional. This comes into play. You got to be intentional about what you want, and you got to follow through. At that point, I was just letting life happen to me. And life sure did happen to me. So I finally decided, after 3 years of working and hitting that glass ceiling, that I really did want to become an attorney, because I had decided that in the 9th grade. So I applied back into UT. They said, sure, you can come on back. He said, you could have come back after 6 months. I'm like, I could have, but I wasn't ready. By the time I got back, I went through college all the way. And then I remember applying to law school, and I really wasn't sure exactly where I was going to go. And it came down to 2 schools, and actually American University was probably my top school at that point. And they gave me enough money to cover tuition, but not to cover room and board. And I didn't want to work there my first year, because it's recommended you not work if you're going to school full time. So at that point, I chose the University of Houston, which I also got accepted into. They were a similarly ranked school, and the tuition was a little bit less, so I went there. And but I remember sitting in college, in my senior year in college, and getting my first letter. Now, how many of you who are already lawyers or have already in law school remember getting your very first acceptance letter? Okay, now for those, keep your hands up. Now, how many of you cried when you got your first acceptance letter? I cried too. I just remembered, it wasn't the school that I really wanted to go to, but I was like, if I got that one, if I got that one, I'm going to go to school at least somewhere. I'm on my way, And so I ended up going to University of Houston Law Center. Now, I knew in law school that I wasn't going to be one of those students who's going to study 10 hours a day and get on law review. That's just not me. I'm personable. I got to be active. I can't sit in a chair all day and just study and read 500 pages all the time and do all that. But if you look at my law school resume, you will see about 20 different things that I did. Because by that time, I learned the lesson of being intentional. And I learned the lesson of failing and not being afraid to fail. I remember in law school, one of the things I did is, in law school, they have what they call like the Board of Advocates. They're the people who run the competitions. Then they have child advocacy courses that you got to sign up for. But there's a big gap between those two, because there's nobody teaching you. There's no student organization that really helps bring in attorneys to teach you child advocacy. And so I remember after my first year, I'm going to create the organization to fill that gap. And I went to the Texas Trial Lawyers Association, and I went to the American Trial Lawyers Association, and I said, what can you do for me? Not what can I do for you. I said, what can you do for me? This is the gap we have. And ultimately, I decided that the Texas Travelers Association was the organization that would help. And I created that student chapter. And I did some other things. I also knew when I was going to get out that I wasn't going to, well, I will tell you this. When I was in law school, my wife had leukemia. And when she was at her worst, I took a semester off of law school to help take care of her. So I didn't graduate with the rest of my class. I graduated in the fall after my class. So by the time I graduated, I really didn't have a home because all the people, I hadn't gone with all the people that graduated in that year, and all the people that I had known had already left. But I graduated and I started my own firm. One of the things I did in terms of being intentional was that I went to all these attorneys that I got to know from the student organization I created, and I was able to ask them for all their cases that they didn't like. So I call them dog cases. I said, give me your dog cases. I'll try anything. You give it to me. I went to personal injury attorneys and said, give me your family cases. I went to family lawyers and said, give me your personal injury cases. So give me something to go in the courtroom. I remember the very first divorce that I did was a prove-up. It was a simple divorce that was agreed. Now, in Texas, you have to have certain questions you have to ask your client in order to prove up the divorce. And about halfway through, the judge says, Mr. Sanchez, it's okay. I got it from here. And that's how, so a simple divorce prove-up, it was, but I was willing to take it. And I learned from that judge. And she did the rest of the prove-up for me, basically. And she took pity on me and did that. And so, in my career, I'm now, in addition to being a lawyer, I'm also, what I call a leader and a speaker. But one of the things I've always done is I've learned now about being intentional, that you can either let life happen to you, or you can happen to life. And which one are you going to choose? Are you going to choose what you're going to do, or are you going to let someone else choose what you're going to do? I would tell you to this day, I'm no longer married, but when I was married, my wife, she was like one of these big television watchers. So, and she didn't go to school. She went to 1 year of college and didn't like it. So she'd go home and watch television for 3 or 4 hours a night. That just wasn't me. Every now and then, to keep up, the family affair, I would watch TVs. But now I don't have cable in my house. You know what I have? I have podcasts. I've got books. I'm doing reading, and I'm learning. If you're not growing every single day, you need to think twice about your life. One of the reasons I know that is because I'm also a cancer survivor. At 34, I was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, and the doctor said that, it wasn't leukemia, it was something rarer than that. And they said, oh, well, what you have, people who get it are usually in their 60s or 70s, and they got 6 to 18 months to live. Like, there's no cure, we don't know. And they said, but we don't know about you, Benjamin, because we just don't know. So I said, well, I know. I know about me. I'm a very positive person. So there's one thing I know is that I'm not going to be an inpatient in this hospital. I know I'm not going to be Benjamin the cancer patient. I'm going to be Benjamin who happens to have cancer, who's dealing with it, but that's not going to define me. And so every day I would be involved with my treatment. And for a while there, I was like a car filling up on gas. I would go into the emergency room of the local cancer hospital every Friday night and get 2 bags of blood in one arm and a bag of Desperol in the other, and that would keep me going for another week. And after about 7 or 8 months of that, the doctor said, well, we can't really let you keep doing this. That's not a way to live. And so they finally gave me a new protocol they said they hadn't tried before. Well, they had tried it, but they just weren't sure. It was still relatively new. And so I would get 5 shots a day for 7 days in a row, and then have 21 days off. And so I would, every morning during those times, I would go in and get a shot, each arm, each leg, and my stomach. and like 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is when I was working for the firm. And I would go to my job. And I became a senior associate while I was a cancer patient. I got awards I got recognition for the firm while I was a cancer patient. And then finally, in December of 2005, that was my last treatment. And they said, well, Benjamin, we don't know exactly, your blood's not up to normal, but it's enough for a steady lifestyle. He said, we don't know how long you got to live. We don't know if you got 5 years to live, if you got 20 years to live, or whatever. I said, you know what? None of us know how long we got to live. I could die tomorrow in an accident. So that just reinforced that I was going to be positive and intentional about everything I did. Now, the last thing I want to tell you as I wrap up here is about significance. Now, one word I've heard during this conference a lot is success. You know, in order to become a success, in order to become successful, you got to do this, this, or this. Now, one of the things among many that I really like about Evangeline is that she knows, like I do, the difference between success and significance. You see, success is about me. Significance is about we. It's a little constant, you know, we're so worried about getting our own little space in the world, about proving ourselves to our family and our friends and everything else, that we're always worried about being successful. And it took me a while. Now, I've been leaders of bar associations, national. I'm a legal columnist. I've had I didn't make law review in law school, but I published a law review article as a lawyer. Now, I've been successful. But a few years ago, my thinking transcended, and I started to realize I don't want to be successful. I want to be significant. And that means, you know, the difference between a successful leader and a significant leader is a successful leader finishes the race first by him or herself. A significant leader finishes the race with a group of people, and probably not even first. You know, enough to bring people with him. We've heard talks about bringing up people behind us. You know, I'm not any better than anybody else in this room. I know that I have certain skills I can provide to people. I know that I'm a good advocate. You know, it's funny because you can be any type of lawyer you want to be. We see LA Law, we've seen, you know, these crime dramas, and, you know, we see these lawyers who are really slick, you know, and all this stuff. We see people bang on the table, you know, see people shout, you know. That's not me. I walk into a courtroom, you know, the judges, they know three things about me. They know I'm going to be honest. They know I'm not going to ask for anything that I don't feel I deserve or my client deserves. And they know I'm going to be respectful. And it's funny because I've had judges tell my opposing counsels during an argument to be quiet, to shut up, to calm down. And here I am, just, you know, I'm doing my thing. You know, I don't like to lose, and I rarely lose when it comes to arguments. But that's not because my great oratory skills. It's because I pick my battles. I'm very intentional about what I argue for and about. So I just want to remind you that the reason I'm here with these distinguished gentlemen is because I am human, just like you. And I have a story, just like every one of you. Don't let your story be written by someone else. Fail often, and fail big. If you're not a failure, you're not trying. How many times did Edison have to reinvent the light bulb before he got it right? How many, I heard James Patterson, the prolific author, talk about his first manuscript was turned down 53 times before the 54th company decided to publish it. So fail big, and fail often. 2, be intentional. Be intentional. You know, you may not see where you're going to be in 50 years or 5 years, or even next year. But you can be intentional about where you want to go. And don't be rigid now. Don't be rigid, because sometimes life happens to you and you got to be prepared for those opportunities. If you got blinders on, you won't see it. But be intentional. And then my last thing, as I said, is the most difficult thing for most people to do. Is be significant. Don't be a success. Be significant. And when you're significant and those people around you, they become significant too. Thank you very much.